I always knew my mother-in-law Vivian would find some way to undermine me during our gender reveal party, but I never imagined she'd stand up in front of all our friends and family to declare me unfit to be a mother. Sometimes the most devastating blows come disguised as concern, wrapped in a false smile and delivered with a glass of champagne in hand. What happened next changed not just that day, but the entire power dynamic of our family forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation designs arrived on a Thursday afternoon. A collection of pastel blue and pink cardstock samples spread across my kitchen island, each one embossed with different fonts and decorative borders. The gender reveal party was still 6 weeks away, but my husband Michael's family insisted everything needed to be just so for the celebration of their first grandchild. "What do you think of this one?" I asked, holding up a simple but elegant design with silver foil accents. Michael glanced up from his laptop where he'd been answering work emails despite it being nearly 7 p.m. "Looks great to me," he replied, with a quick smile. "But you know my mother will have opinions. Maybe we should wait until Sunday dinner to decide." I tried not to let my disappointment show. At 32, with a successful career as a pediatric physical therapist, I hadn't expected to be seeking approval for party invitations like a teenager asking permission to go to prom. But this was the dance I'd been performing since marrying into the Harrington family 3 years ago. "I suppose we can bring samples," I conceded, gathering the cards into a neat stack. My hand instinctively moved to my growing baby bump, just beginning to show at 16 weeks. Our little one, still a mystery. Of pink or blue, already at the center of family politics. The Harringtons weren't just wealthy. They were old money with a capital OM. 3 generations of successful investment bankers had built a fortune that afforded them not just financial security, but a certainty about how things should be done that brooked no argument. Michael had broken family tradition by becoming a software engineer instead of joining Harrington Financial, a decision that had made him something of a family disappointment despite his considerable success with his own tech startup. My background couldn't have been more different. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to put me through college, I'd built my career through scholarships, student loans, and relentless determination. The contrast between our upbringings had been fascinating to Michael when we first met at a mutual friend's dinner party. He'd been charmed by my stories of growing up in a small apartment where the hot water often ran out, and weekend entertainment consisted of free community events rather than country club gatherings. "You're so real," he'd told me on our 3rd date. "Everyone in my world is so concerned with appearances." That appreciation for my realness seemed to diminish considerably once we were engaged, and his family, particularly his mother, began to exert influence over every aspect of our lives, from our wedding plans to the neighborhood where we purchased our home. "Elena," Michael's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Everything okay?" I nodded, though the familiar knot of anxiety had already formed in my stomach at the prospect of Sunday dinner with his parents. "Just thinking about the party. There's still so much to plan." "Mom mentioned she's created a spreadsheet," he said, closing his laptop. "She's bringing it on Sunday." Of course she has, I thought, but didn't say. Vivian Harrington approached. Social events with the tactical precision of a military campaign. Nothing was too small to track, measure, and optimize, especially when it came to her first grandchild. Sunday arrived with unseasonable warmth for April in Boston. I chose a floral maternity dress that I hoped struck the right balance between casual and put together for dinner at the Harrington estate in Brookline. The sprawling Tudor revival had been in Michael's family for generations, its manicured grounds and imposing facade a physical manifestation of the Harrington legacy. "You look beautiful," Michael said, as we drove through wrought iron gates that parted silently at the recognition of his car. "Thank you," I replied, smoothing my dress nervously. I just hope your mother approves of at least one of these invitation designs. I'd like to get them ordered this week. Michael reached over to squeeze my hand. It's our party, Elena. Our baby. We get final say. The words were reassuring, but history had taught me otherwise. In theory, we had autonomy over our decisions. In practice, Vivian Harrington had a remarkable ability to maneuver situations until her preferences became the only sensible option. Robert Harrington, Michael's father, greeted us at the door with genuine warmth. At 65, he maintained the athletic build of a man 20 years younger, his silver hair and tailored casual wear completing the picture of distinguished affluence. "There they are!" he exclaimed, embracing Michael before turning to me with a gentle hug. "And how's my grandchild doing today?" "Active?" I replied with a smile. "Especially around 3 a.m. Robert laughed. "That's a Harrington for you. Always moving markets, even before birth." Vivian appeared in the foyer, immaculate as always in cream-colored slacks and a cashmere sweater, her ash-blonde hair arranged in a perfect bob that didn't dare move out of place. At 62, she remained striking, her features sharp and her posture impeccable. "Michael, darling," she air-kissed both his cheeks before turning to me. "Elena, you look comfortable." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The slight pause before comfortable spoke volumes. In Vivian's vocabulary, it was a synonym for not quite up to standard. I'd learned to decode these subtle linguistic jabs over the years. "Thank you for having us," I said, producing the stack of invitation samples like a peace offering. "Oh, we'll get to those," Vivian replied with a dismissive wave. "I have a complete presentation prepared for the gender reveal. But first, Marguerite has prepared a lovely dinner." Marguerite was the Harringtons' housekeeper of 20 years, a French-Canadian woman who ruled the kitchen with firm authority while deferring to Vivian in all other matters. The dining room table was set with the casual Sunday china, which still looked museum-worthy to my eyes, and laden with a spring menu of roasted rack of lamb, new potatoes, and asparagus. As we took our seats, I noticed an extra place setting. "Are we expecting someone else?" I asked. "Yes, Abigail is joining us," Vivian replied, unfolding her napkin with a precise flick of the wrist. I thought it would be helpful to have her input on the gender reveal plans. Abigail Taylor was Vivian's best friend and co-chair of numerous charity committees. Their friendship spanned decades, their children had grown up together, and they shared an unspoken language of raised eyebrows and meaningful glances that conveyed volumes across crowded rooms. "I didn't realize Abigail was involved in our party planning," I said carefully, catching Michael's eye across the table. He gave an almost imperceptible shrug, clearly as surprised as I was. "Abigail has planned dozens of important events," Vivian explained as if to a child. "Her daughter Stephanie's baby shower was featured in Boston Magazine last year, and she has connections with all the best vendors." Before I could respond, the doorbell chimed, and moments later, Abigail swept, in a vision in expensive simplicity, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a chignon. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, taking the seat beside Vivian. The traffic from Beacon Hill was dreadful. Too many tourists already. She turned her attention to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Elena, you're positively glowing. Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you," I replied, taking a sip of water to avoid saying more. Throughout the first course, conversation revolved around neutral topics: Robert's golf game, Michael's latest project, a charity auction Vivian and Abigail were organizing. It wasn't until Marguerite served the main course that Vivian produced a leather portfolio from beside her chair. "Now," she said, opening it to reveal color-coded printouts, "I've put together a comprehensive plan for the gender reveal." For the next 20 minutes, she outlined a vision that bore little resemblance to the intimate gathering Michael and I had discussed. According to Vivian's plan, the event would take place at the Harrington estate, with catering by an exclusive Boston restaurant, floral arrangements by the designer who did White House state dinners, and a guest list of over 100 people, most of whom were Harrington family connections I barely knew. And for the reveal itself, Vivian continued, turning to a page with professional sketches, I've arranged for a custom installation. When the moment comes, you'll both pull these silk cords and either pink or blue butterflies will be released over the garden terrace. Live butterflies? I asked, alarmed. Of course not, Abigail interjected with a laugh. Silk ones on nearly invisible threads. The effect is magical. We did something similar for the Cabot Foundation Gala last spring. I exchanged glances with Michael, who finally spoke up. Mom, this is incredibly thoughtful, but Elena and I were thinking of something smaller. Maybe 40 guests, maximum. Vivian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Darling, this is the first Harrington grandchild. People expect a certain standard. Which people? I asked, unable to contain myself. Because most of these names, I gestured to the guest list, are business associates and social connections, not close friends or family. Connections matter, Elena, Vivian replied coolly. This child will be a Harrington. The networks we build now will benefit your baby throughout life. We appreciate the thought. Michael tried again. But consider it our gift, Roberts interrupted, his tone conciliatory. Your mother has put a great deal of effort into this plan, and frankly, it would be good for your professional visibility too, son. The implication was clear. This wasn't just about celebrating our baby. It was about leveraging the occasion for family status and Michael's business prospects. Feeling cornered, I changed tactics. What about the invitations? We brought some samples we liked. Vivian glanced at the stack I'd brought without picking them up. No need. I've already commissioned custom invitations from Worthington Press. They're designing something unique featuring the Harrington crest. The Harrington crest? I repeated, feeling my cheeks flush. But this is about our baby, not just the Harrington lineage. Abigail let out a small, patronizing laugh. Elena, dear, family heritage is everything in Boston. You'll understand once you've been here longer. I've been here 3 years, I pointed out, trying to keep my voice even. And while I respect tradition, this is our child. Half Harrington, half Navarro. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Michael reached for my hand under the table, giving it a supportive squeeze, but said nothing to back me up verbally. Vivian took a deliberate sip of her wine before responding. Of course, no one is forgetting that. But you must understand, there are expectations when it comes to Harrington family events. Speaking of family, Abigail interjected with practiced smoothness, have you given any thought to childcare arrangements after the baby arrives, Elena? I understand your mother lives quite far away. Phoenix isn't another planet, I replied, more sharply than I intended. She's planning to come stay with us for the first month. After that, I'll be taking a 6-month leave from the clinic. 6 months? Vivian's eyebrows rose. And then what? Back to work full-time with a newborn. At home? Here it was, the conversation I'd been dreading. Michael and I had discussed our plans extensively. My career was important to me, and the children I worked with at the rehabilitation center needed consistency. We'd agreed I would return to work 3 days a week after my leave, with Michael adjusting his schedule to work from home those days. We have a plan, I said firmly. Michael will be hands-on and we'll balance our schedules. Vivian exchanged a meaningful look with Abigail. Children need stability, Elena, especially in their early years. Passing a baby back and forth between parents and various caregivers can be quite disruptive. Modern research actually shows that children benefit from having engaged parents, regardless of work arrangements, I countered, drawing on my professional knowledge. Quality of interaction matters more than quantity of hours. Research, Vivian repeated with a dismissive wave. When Michael was born, I put my career on hold for 5 years. That's what a child needs, a mother's full attention. Different. Families make different choices, I said, feeling my professional credentials being dismissed out of hand, and Michael and I are committed to co-parenting equally. Robert cleared his throat. I'm sure you'll sort out the details closer to the time. Now, about the gender reveal. I think your mother's plan sounds wonderful, doesn't it, Michael? Michael looked trapped between loyalties. It's very comprehensive, he acknowledged, but I think Elena and I should discuss it privately before making any decisions. It was a diplomatic answer that committed to nothing while offending no one. A classic Michael response when caught between his mother and me. The conversation shifted to safer ground for the remainder of dinner, but the tension lingered like a heavy perfume in the air. When dessert was served, a delicate lemon tart that I could barely taste through my frustration, Vivian returned to the topic of childcare. I've taken the liberty of contacting Westbrook Family Services, she announced, producing another glossy brochure from her portfolio. They're the premier nanny placement agency in New England. They've worked with the Cabots, the Lowells, even a few of the Kennedy cousins. Mom, we haven't decided on a nanny service, Michael said, his tone finally showing some resistance. It's just preliminary research, Vivian insisted. There's a 2-year waiting list for their premium services, but Abigail sits on a board with the founder, and she's agreed to prioritize your application. I stared at the brochure with its images of Mary Poppins-esque women in tasteful attire, attending to well-dressed children. The listed services included household management, educational enrichment, and social etiquette training. This looks more like a governess service than modern childcare, I observed, trying to keep my tone neutral. Precisely, Vivian replied, missing or ignoring my skepticism. Westbrook nannies are educated at top universities, many with backgrounds in early childhood education or child psychology. They understand the unique needs of children from established families. We're not hiring someone to turn our baby into a tiny aristocrat, I said, finally losing patience. When and if we decide on childcare beyond our own parenting, we'll research options that align with our values. Vivian's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Elena, I understand you didn't grow up with these advantages, but surely, you want the best for your child? The implication struck like a physical blow. According to Vivian, my background made me incapable of determining what was best for my own baby. I think what Vivian means, Abigail interjected smoothly, is that there are certain opportunities that come with the Harrington name, traditions that have served the family well for generations. I know exactly what she means, I replied, setting down my dessert fork with a finality that silenced the table. And I'd appreciate it if decisions about our child weren't made behind our backs. Michael placed his hand on mine. Let's take the information and discuss it later, he suggested quietly. Mom's just trying to help. The evening concluded with strained politeness. As we gathered our things to leave, including Vivian's party plans, the unwanted nanny service brochure, and my untouched invitation samples, Robert pulled Michael aside for a quick word about some investment opportunity, leaving me momentarily alone with Vivian in the foyer. Elena, she said, her voice lowered confidentially, I hope you didn't take offense earlier. I only want what's best for my grandchild. I understand, I replied, struggling to maintain civility. But Michael and I need to make these decisions together, as parents. Vivian patted my arm with condescending gentleness. Of course, dear. But remember, the Harrington name comes with certain responsibilities. This child will be part of a legacy larger than just your little family unit. On the drive home, I finally let my frustration surface. Your mother has already planned our entire child's life, from gender reveal to college prep, without consulting us once. Michael sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. She means well, Elena. This is just how she shows love, by taking charge and making plans. It's not love to steamroll over other people's choices, I countered. And why didn't you back me up more firmly about the party plans? Or the nanny service? I did say we needed to discuss it privately, he defended. That's not the same as saying, Mom, we've already decided on something simpler, or we don't want to use that nanny service. Michael's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You know how my mother gets. Direct confrontation just makes everything worse. It was an old argument between us. Michael's strategy with his parents, particularly his mother, was one of strategic avoidance and delayed decisions. He would nod along in the moment, then quietly do things his own way later, avoiding direct conflict at all costs. It was a survival mechanism developed over decades, but it left me feeling unsupported and alone in these confrontations. This can't continue when the baby comes, I said more quietly. We need to present a united front on parenting decisions. We will, he assured me, reaching for my hand. I promise. Let's just get through this gender reveal first. But as the weeks passed, Vivian's plans gained momentum through sheer force of will. The custom invitations arrived at our house without warning. Ivory cardstock embossed with the Harrington family crest and script that read, "A Harrington heir awaits. Join us to discover if it's a lord or lady." Lord or lady? I exclaimed when I opened the package. We're having a baby, not a character from Downton Abbey. Michael winced. I know it's over the top, but they're already printed and addressed. And technically, I am descended from minor British nobility on my father's side. That was 4 generations ago. Just let this one go, he pleaded. We can assert ourselves on the more important things. That became Michael's refrain as Vivian systematically took control of every aspect of the gender reveal party. The guest list expanded to 120 people. The simple afternoon gathering transformed into a catered event with a string quartet. The location shifted from our backyard to the Harrington estate. With each change, Michael assured me it was easier to concede on small details than fight battles we couldn't win. But it wasn't just the party that concerned me. 3 weeks before the event, a thick envelope arrived from Westbrook Family Services, addressed to both of us, but with a personal note to Vivian paper-clipped to the front. Vivian, as promised, we've expedited the Harrington application and enclosed our standard service contract for review. The assessment interview can be scheduled at the client's convenience, but we recommend completing the process before the baby arrives to secure one of our premier nannies. Cordially, Margaret Westbrook. I stared at the contract with its multiple appendices outlining services, fees, and requirements. The presumption was breathtaking. Not only had Vivian submitted an application on our behalf, but she'd apparently led the agency to believe we were committed clients simply awaiting formalities. Did you know about this? I asked Michael that evening, pushing the contract across the kitchen island. He looked genuinely surprised. No. She mentioned researching options, but I had no idea she'd gone this far. This has to stop, I insisted. Your mother is making life-altering decisions about our child without even consulting us. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize. I'll talk to her tomorrow. We'll talk to her, I corrected, together. But the conversation never happened. Michael's startup entered crisis mode the next day when a major investor threatened to pull out. For the next 2 weeks, he worked 16-hour days trying to salvage the deal, leaving early and returning home long after I'd gone to bed. I was left to field daily calls from Vivian about party details. Each conversation a minefield of passive-aggressive comments about my input, or lack thereof, in the planning process. I've selected the catering menu, she informed me 10 days before the event. Nothing too spicy or exotic, of course. We wouldn't want to upset your digestion in your condition. The implication that my Hispanic heritage meant I couldn't be trusted to choose appropriate food for guests was clear, but too subtle to directly challenge without seeming oversensitive. And the photographer has asked for a list of required shots, she continued. I've provided the standard family groupings, but if there's anyone specific on your side you want included, do let me know. My side consisted of exactly 3 people: my mother, my aunt, and my cousin who lived in the Boston area. Against the battalion of Harrington relations, we were hardly a faction requiring special accommodation. As the gender reveal party approached, I felt increasingly isolated. Michael was distracted by work, my mother wouldn't arrive until 3 days before the event, and I was fighting morning sickness that had inexplicably returned in my second trimester. The nursery stood half-painted, the crib unassembled in its box, projects Michael had promised to complete but hadn't found time for between work crises and family obligations. The night before the party, I found myself alone in our kitchen at 11 p.m., assembling gift bags for the guests, another task Vivian had delegated to me at the last minute. Each bag contained expensive artisanal treats, a miniature bottle of champagne, and a custom-made silver bookmark engraved with the Harrington crest and tomorrow's date. As I tied satin ribbons with increasingly clumsy fingers, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Deal finally closed. Celebration dinner with investors running late. Don't wait up. Love you both. I stared at the message, tears of frustration welling in my eyes. Tomorrow, 120 near strangers would gather to celebrate our baby, and I would face Vivian's subtle criticisms and society friends' evaluating gazes alone until Michael arrived, likely rushed and distracted. I felt like an afterthought in what should have been a joyful family moment, the revealing of our child's gender, a private miracle turned public spectacle. The gender reveal party dawned with picture-perfect weather, as if even the elements dared not defy Vivian Harrington's will. I arrived at the estate early as instructed, wearing a cream-colored maternity dress Vivian had suggested from an exclusive boutique, the price tag equal to a week's salary at my clinic. The transformation of the Harrington Gardens was admittedly spectacular. White chairs arranged in precise rows faced an arbor festooned with both pink and blue flowers. Tables draped in silk held elegant refreshments and a multi-tiered cake designed to reveal either pink or blue sponge when cut. The silk butterfly mechanism, the grand finale of the reveal, had been constructed over the terrace, currently concealed by decorative panels. "Elena, there you are," Vivian called, approaching with a clipboard and an earpiece connecting her to the event staff. "We need to review the timeline once more before guests arrive." I nodded, too tired to argue. Michael had crawled into bed at 3 a.m. and was now rushing to pick up my mother from the airport, promising to return before the party began at noon. For the next hour, I was positioned like a prop as Vivian directed photographers, caterers, and florists. My opinion was neither sought nor acknowledged as final adjustments were made to the event my husband and I were supposedly hosting. Guests began arriving at precisely noon, greeted by servers offering champagne and non-alcoholic mocktails for the expectant mother and other abstainers. I found myself stationed beside Vivian and Robert, engaged in an endless receiving line of handshakes and air kisses from Boston Society members who looked at me with curious assessment, as if wondering how this outsider had managed to secure a place in the Harrington lineage. "Elena is a physical therapist," Vivian would explain to each new arrival, as if my profession was a charming quirk rather than a career I'd worked hard to establish. "She works with children, which will be such good practice for motherhood." The implication that my career was merely preparation for my real purpose of continuing the Harrington line made my smile increasingly strained. By the time Michael arrived with my mother Sophia, I felt like my face might crack from the effort of maintaining pleasant composure. "Mija!" my mother exclaimed, embracing me with genuine warmth that nearly brought me to tears after the morning's performative interactions. At 58, Sophia Navarro remained beautiful and vibrant, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her smile genuine and unreserved. "You look exhausted," she whispered in Spanish as she held me. "Is everything okay?" "Later," I promised in the same language, aware of Vivian watching our interaction with barely concealed disapproval. Vivian had made it clear early in my relationship with Michael that speaking Spanish in social settings was exclusionary and impolite. Never mind that it was my first language and the primary way I communicated with my family. Michael kissed me quickly before being pulled away by his father to meet an important business contact. I watched him go, a familiar sense of abandonment washing over me as I was left once again to navigate Vivian's domain alone. "Elena," Vivian approached, linking her arm through mine with firm authority. "The Westbrooks have arrived. Margaret is eager to meet you." Before I could protest, I was being steered across the lawn toward an elegant older couple. The woman, impeccably dressed in a pale blue suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, extended a manicured hand. "Elena, what a pleasure. I'm Margaret Westbrook. Vivian has told me all about you and your little one on the way." "Has she?" I replied, shaking her hand automatically while trying to discern exactly what Vivian might have shared. "We're so pleased to welcome another Harrington family to our client roster," Margaret continued. "Our most experienced nannies are already being considered for your placement." I felt a flush of anger rising to my cheeks. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We haven't actually—" "Elena is still adjusting to the idea of having help," Vivian interrupted smoothly. "First-time mothers often believe they can manage everything themselves, don't they?" Margaret nodded with patronizing understanding. "Oh, I see it all the time. But once the baby arrives and reality sets in, they're grateful for the support. Our nannies provide much more than just childcare. They're partners in raising children, with the proper values and advantages." "Proper values?" I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Traditional values," Margaret clarified with a meaningful glance at Vivian. "Structure, respect, appropriate social development, things that come naturally in certain upbringings but might need reinforcement in. More diverse family situations." The implication struck like a physical blow. According to this stranger, informed by whatever Vivian had told her, my background made me inherently deficient as a mother, incapable of instilling proper values in my own child without professional intervention from someone with the right pedigree. "Elena's background is in pediatric therapy," Vivian explained to Margaret, as if this somehow justified their assumption that I needed help raising my own child. "Very hands-on work, but perhaps not focused on the social aspects of child development that are so crucial for a Harrington." I stood frozen, unable to form a response that wouldn't create a scene in the middle of this perfect garden party. Margaret Westbrook's husband joined the conversation, a distinguished man who immediately began discussing fee structures and contract details, as if my participation in the decision was merely a formality. "We've brought the finalized contract," he informed us, producing an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Once signed, we can begin the nanny selection process immediately. With the baby arriving in just a few months, timing is essential to secure the best candidates." The contract, the same multi-page document that had arrived at our home weeks earlier, was presented as if it were a gift rather than an unwanted intrusion. I accepted it mechanically, searching the crowd for Michael and finding him deep in conversation with a group of men who looked like potential investors. "If you'll excuse me," I managed, clutching the envelope, "I should check on some details with the caterer." I escaped to a quiet corner of the garden, behind a decorative hedge where I could breathe without the weight of scrutiny pressing on my chest. The party continued around me, a perfectly orchestrated celebration of a baby whose parents had been relegated to the roles of genetic contributors rather than decision-makers. After composing myself, I rejoined the gathering just as Vivian was calling everyone to attention for the gender reveal. Michael appeared at my side, taking my hand with an encouraging squeeze. Ready for the big moment? He whispered, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from me. Michael, I began urgently. The Westbrooks are here with a nanny contract. Your mother has told them it's a done deal. His expression flickered with concern, but before he could respond, Vivian was guiding us both to the center of the gathering, beneath the hidden butterfly mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to the assembled guests, the moment we've all been waiting for. Will the newest Harrington be carrying on the family name as a boy or bringing a fresh perspective as a girl? The crowd cheered as Michael and I were positioned beneath silken cords that would trigger the reveal. Cameras flashed, the professional photographer directing us to look excited and place hands on the baby bump. On the count of 3, Vivian instructed, pull the cords together and reveal your baby's future. The countdown began, guests joining in with enthusiasm. 3, 2, 1. We pulled the cords in unison, and above us, hundreds of delicate blue butterflies cascaded down on nearly invisible threads, fluttering in the spring breeze. A boy. We were having a son. The crowd erupted in applause and exclamations. Michael embraced me, genuine joy breaking through the orchestrated spectacle as we shared a moment of real connection. A boy, he whispered against my hair. Our son. For a brief, shining moment, the manufactured nature of the event fell away, and I felt the simple joy of discovering this fundamental truth about our child. Then Vivian was beside us, beaming triumphantly. A Harrington heir, she announced, her voice carrying across the lawn. The family tradition continues. Guests surged forward with congratulations. The moment of intimacy shattered as we were once again absorbed into the social performance. Champagne flowed, the blue-filled cake was cut with ceremony, and toasts were made to young Master Harrington, as if our son had already been assigned his role in the family dynasty. As the celebration continued, I found myself separated from Michael again, this time cornered by Abigail and several of Vivian's friends near the dessert table. A boy for your first child. How perfect, one woman commented. Vivian must be thrilled. Boys are so much easier anyway, another added. Girls require so much more. Management. And with your work schedule, Abigail interjected, a boy will be more resilient to the coming and going. Though I still think Vivian is right about you needing proper help. I smiled tightly, wondering how many of my personal details Vivian had shared with her social circle. Every child is different, regardless of gender, and we're still finalizing our childcare plans. Oh, but I thought it was settled, the first woman said with a puzzled expression. Vivian mentioned you'd engaged Westbrook. Margaret was just telling us how they've already begun the selection process for your family. The presumption left me speechless. Across the lawn, I could see Margaret Westbrook in animated conversation with Vivian, both occasionally glancing in my direction. If you'll excuse me, I murmured, extricating myself from the group and making my way toward my mother, who stood somewhat awkwardly with my aunt and cousin, isolated islands in a sea of Harrington connections. Mija, my mother said when I reached her, concern evident in her eyes. What's happening here? This doesn't feel like your celebration at all. It's not, I admitted quietly. This is Vivian's show from start to finish. Sofia Navarro had never been one to mince words. And where is your husband while his mother orchestrates your life? I glanced toward Michael, now engaged in what appeared to be a business discussion with his father and several older men. Networking, I replied with more bitterness than intended. My mother squeezed my hand. Elena, this isn't right. Your baby, your decisions. Remember what I always taught you. Ah, there you are, Elena. Vivian's voice cut through our conversation as she approached with determined purpose. The Westbrooks are preparing to leave but wanted to confirm a meeting next week to finalize the nanny arrangements. My mother's eyebrows rose, but she remained silent, watching the interaction with careful assessment. "There's nothing to finalize, Vivian," I said, finding strength in my mother's presence. "Michael and I haven't agreed to engage their services." Vivian's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Don't be difficult, dear. This is the premier childcare service in New England, with a 2-year waiting list that we've bypassed through personal connections. The contract is ready for signatures." "Contract?" my mother interjected. "For what exactly?" "A nanny service," I explained, "that Vivian has arranged without consulting us." "Not just a nanny service," Vivian corrected with a patronizing laugh. "Westbrook provides comprehensive childhood development and proper social integration, something essential for a Harrington heir, especially considering—" She paused, glancing meaningfully at my mother. "Considering what, exactly?" Sophia asked, her voice considering Elena's background. Vivian finished, her voice dripping with condescension. "Children require consistent exposure to certain social norms and cultural expectations, especially when one parent comes from a different upbringing." The implication hung in the air between us, too explicit to ignore yet too carefully worded to directly challenge without seeming oversensitive. My mother straightened her spine, the dignity she'd maintained through decades of struggle as a single parent evident in her posture. "My daughter has a master's degree in pediatric physical therapy," Sophia replied evenly. "She's spent her career helping children develop and thrive. I'd say that makes her exceptionally qualified to raise her own child, wouldn't you?" Vivian's smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Professional experience with other people's children is quite different from understanding the unique requirements of a Harrington heir. There are certain traditions, expectations. Elena couldn't possibly be familiar with them, through no fault of her own, of course." "Vivian," I interjected, finding my voice, "I appreciate your concern, but Michael and I will make our own decisions about childcare." "Michael agrees with me about the importance of proper guidance," Vivian countered. "We discussed it just this morning before you arrived." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Had Michael really discussed this with his mother behind my back, after all our conversations about presenting a united front? "Then I'll need to speak with my husband," I said firmly. "Excuse me." I moved away from Vivian, scanning the crowd. For Michael. I spotted him near the bar, now alone as he checked something on his phone. Making my way through clusters of guests, many of whom I'd never met before today, I reached him with determined strides. "We need to talk," I said quietly but firmly. "Now." Michael looked up, his expression shifting from distraction to concern. "What's wrong?" "Did you discuss the Westbrook nanny service with your mother this morning?" I asked, getting straight to the point. His hesitation told me everything. "She called while I was on the way to the airport. She mentioned it, but I didn't agree to anything specific." "That's not what she's telling people," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "The Westbrooks are here with a contract they expect us to sign. Your mother has told them and half her friends that it's already decided." Michael ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, I should have mentioned it, but I only said we'd consider all options. You know how she twists things to get her way." "Yes, I do know. Which is why we agreed to present a united front on parenting decisions. Instead, you're having private conversations with her that undermine our partnership." He glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with having this discussion in public. "Can we talk about this later? This isn't the place." "When is the place, Michael? At home, where you've been absent for weeks? On the phone between your meetings? This is happening now, and I'm standing here alone while your mother orchestrates our child's future." Before he could respond, Robert appeared beside us, clapping a hand on Michael's shoulder. "There's someone you need to meet, son. Douglas Chamberlain from Venture Capital Partners. Very interested in your latest project." Michael looked torn, his eyes darting between his Father and me. Dad, can it wait a few minutes? Elena and I— Chamberlain is leaving soon, Robert interrupted. This is a multi-million-dollar opportunity, Michael. Surely personal matters can wait. I saw the moment Michael's resolve crumbled. 5 minutes, he promised me, squeezing my hand. Just give me 5 minutes. I watched him walk away with his father, knowing from experience that 5 minutes would stretch into 30 or more. Turning back toward the party, I found myself face to face with Margaret Westbrook once again. Elena, before we leave, I wanted to make sure you have all the information you need about our services, she said, her tone professional but presumptuous. Vivian mentioned you might have some reservations. Mrs. Westbrook, I replied, with forced politeness. I appreciate your interest in our family, but Michael and I haven't made any decisions about childcare arrangements. She smiled with practiced patience. Of course, all new mothers feel that way initially, but the reality of caring for a newborn while maintaining a household to Harrington standards is quite overwhelming, especially for someone not raised with household staff. I'm not concerned about maintaining Harrington standards, I said, the accumulated frustration of the day seeping into my voice. I'm concerned about raising a healthy, happy child in a loving home. That's precisely what Westbrook provides, she continued smoothly. Our nannies ensure children receive proper guidance while allowing mothers to maintain their social obligations without undue stress. Vivian has shared how important your career is to you. Our services would allow you to return to work with complete peace of mind. The casual mention of private conversations between Vivian and this stranger about my life choices sent a surge of anger through me. What else has Vivian shared with you about me, Mrs. Westbrook? Margaret's composure slipped slightly. Nothing inappropriate, I assure you. Simply that you come from more modest circumstances and might benefit from guidance regarding the social expectations for a child of the Harrington family. Modest circumstances, I repeated. You mean that I'm the daughter of a single mother who immigrated from Mexico? That I worked my way through college on scholarships and student loans? That I don't come from old Boston money? There's no need to be defensive, Margaret replied, her tone cooling. We work with many families where one spouse comes from a different background. Our nannies are trained to bridge cultural differences tactfully while ensuring children receive consistent messages about appropriate behavior and social norms. The implication was unmistakable. My background, my culture, my values were considered deficits to be corrected rather than strengths to be celebrated. In this woman's eyes, and apparently in Vivian's, I was inherently unqualified to raise my own child without professional intervention to ensure he became a proper Harrington. Mrs. Westbrook, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, let me be perfectly clear. If and when my husband and I decide on childcare arrangements, we will contact services that align with our shared values. Until then, I'd appreciate it if you would stop discussing my family with my mother-in-law as if I weren't a part of the equation. Margaret's eyes widened slightly at my directness. I see. Well, I'll leave our information with you. Vivian has been quite insistent about securing our services for your family, but naturally, both parents need to be in agreement. As she walked away, I noticed several nearby guests quickly averting their gazes, pretending they hadn't been eavesdropping on our exchange. The momentary satisfaction of standing my ground quickly gave way to acute awareness that I'd created exactly the kind of scene Michael was always anxious to avoid at family functions. I needed space to breathe, to process the layers of presumption and prejudice that had been revealed today. Making my way toward the house, I slipped inside through the terrace doors, seeking a moment of quiet away from the celebration that felt less and less like my own with each passing minute. The Harrington home was silent compared to the buzz of the party outside, the staff apparently all engaged with serving guests. I found myself in Robert's study, a masculine space of leather-bound books and hunting trophies that embodied old Boston wealth. Taking a seat in one of the armchairs, I closed my eyes, one hand resting on my belly where my son, now confirmed, with fluttering blue butterflies, continued his oblivious somersaults. "What kind of world am I bringing you into, little one?" I whispered. "And how do I protect you from becoming a pawn in your grandmother's social chess game?" The door opened, and I looked up expecting to see Michael, perhaps having finally extricated himself from his father's networking machinations. Instead, Vivian entered, her expression a careful mask of concern. "There you are," she said, closing the door behind her. "Are you feeling unwell? It doesn't look good for the host to disappear from her own party." "It doesn't feel like my party," I replied honestly. From the invitations to the guest list, to the Westbrooks with their contract, none of this reflects what Michael and I wanted. Vivian sighed, taking the seat opposite me. "Elena, I've tried to be patient with your adjustment to the Harrington way of doing things. But now that you're carrying the next generation, it's time to set aside these notions of independence and embrace the responsibilities that come with this family name. My child will be half Navarro," I reminded her. "My heritage, my values, my culture matter too." "Of course they do," she replied with a dismissive wave. "No one is suggesting otherwise. But surely you want your son to have every advantage, every opportunity? The Harrington connections, the social standing, these are gifts we're offering your child." "At what cost?" I asked. "The erasure of half his identity? Professional guidance to ensure he conforms to your standards rather than developing his own character?" Vivian's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "You make it sound so sinister when I'm simply trying to help. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to secure a placement with Westbrook? The waiting list is years long, but I've made it happen for you." "I never asked for that," I pointed out. "Neither did Michael." "Michael understands the importance of proper upbringing," Vivian countered. "He benefited from it himself." "Did he?" I challenged. "Because from what he's told me, his childhood was filled with rigid expectations, emotional distance, and the constant pressure to uphold the family image regardless of his own desires." Color rose in Vivian's cheeks. "That's a very ungrateful characterization of the advantages he was given. We provided the best of everything: education, opportunities, connections. Look at him now, successful, respected, positioned to carry on the Harrington legacy." "He built his own success often against your wishes," I reminded her. "You wanted him at Harrington Financial, not founding a tech startup." "That was a phase we indulged," Vivian said dismissively. "Eventually he'll take his proper place in the family business, especially now with a son on the way." The casual certainty with which she mapped out my husband's future, and by extension, our child's, ignited something fierce within me. "That's not your decision to make. Not for Michael, not for our baby, and certainly not for me." Vivian leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Elena, let me be frank. You've married into a family with certain expectations, certain standards. I've tried to help you navigate this world, to guide you toward appropriate choices, but you consistently resist the wisdom of those who understand the responsibilities that come with the Harrington name. Perhaps because I don't see them as responsibilities but as restrictions," I replied. "Arbitrary rules designed to maintain appearances rather than foster genuine connection or personal growth." "That attitude," Vivian said, pointing a manicured finger at me, "is precisely why I've taken steps to ensure my grandson receives proper guidance. You simply don't understand what's required." "What's required for what?" I asked, my patience wearing dangerously thin. "For maintaining the Harrington position in society, for preserving the legacy that generations have built. This isn't just about your personal preferences, Elena. This is about something much larger than yourself." I stood up, needing to move as anger coursed through me. "No, Vivian, this is exactly about me, and Michael, and our baby, our family. Not some abstract legacy that exists only in your mind." "You're being childish," she snapped, her composure finally cracking. "This is why I contacted Westbrook. Clearly, you're not equipped to understand the social responsibilities this child will inherit." "Say what you really mean," I challenged, tired of the veiled implications. "You think I'm not good enough? That my background, my culture, my values aren't worthy of shaping your grandchild?" Vivian stood as well, drawing herself up to her full height. "What I think is that you're willfully naive about what this child needs. Your background simply hasn't prepared you for raising a Harrington heir properly." "There it is," I said quietly, the truth finally spoken aloud. "It's not an insult, Elena. It's a reality. Your mother did her best, I'm sure, but a single, immigrant woman working multiple jobs couldn't possibly have exposed you to the social nuances and cultural expectations that are second nature in our circles." Each word struck like a physical blow, all the more painful for confirming suspicions I'd harbored since first meeting Vivian 3 years ago. In her eyes, I would always be deficient, always lacking, always an outsider who had somehow slipped past the gates that should have kept me firmly on the other side of Boston society. "My mother," I said, my voice tight with controlled fury, "taught me integrity, resilience, and unconditional love. Those are the values I plan to pass on to my son, with or without your approval." "Admirable qualities," Vivian conceded, with patronizing condescension, "but hardly sufficient for a child who will someday take his place among Boston's elite, which is why I've taken steps to ensure he receives appropriate guidance." "The Westbrook contract," I realized aloud. "You've done more than just make inquiries, haven't you?" A flicker of something, guilt, defiance, crossed Vivian's perfectly composed features. "I've secured the best possible care for my grandson, yes. The contract is ready for signatures, with just a few personal details to finalize." "You had no right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "No right whatsoever." I had every right as his grandmother to ensure his proper upbringing when it became clear his mother might not prioritize the necessary social development. The door opened before I could respond, and Michael appeared, concern etched on his features. "There you are. People are asking where you've gone. The photographer wants some final family shots before guests start leaving." He paused, clearly sensing the tension between his mother and me. "What's going on?" "Your mother has taken the liberty of arranging our childcare without consulting us," I informed him, watching his expression carefully. "Apparently, she's moved beyond making inquiries to actually securing services." Michael turned to Vivian with a frown. "Mom, we talked about this. I told you Elena and I would make these decisions together." "You said you'd consider the options," Vivian replied smoothly. "And Westbrook is unquestionably the best option. I've simply expedited the process to ensure you don't miss this opportunity." "By doing what exactly?" Michael pressed. Vivian hesitated, and in that pause, I knew whatever she'd done went beyond what even she could easily justify. "I may have provided some preliminary information to complete the application process," she admitted finally. "Basic family details, your financial qualifications, that sort of thing." "What sort of thing?" I asked, suspicion growing. "What exactly did you tell them about us? About me?" The silence that followed was damning. Michael stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him. "Mom, what did you do?" Vivian straightened her already perfect posture. "Nothing inappropriate. I simply ensured they understood the circumstances. That Elena comes from a different background, that she intends to continue working rather than focusing on motherhood full-time, that certain cultural differences might need to be navigated sensitively." "Cultural differences," I repeated. "You mean my Mexican heritage?" "Among other things," Vivian replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's relevant information for selecting the right nanny, someone who can provide consistent guidance while respecting your unique perspective." Michael's expression darkened. That wasn't your information to share. And the implication that Elena needs some kind of cultural correction to be a good mother is completely unacceptable. The support I'd been craving from him for weeks finally materialized, but the damage had already been done. Vivian had effectively told a prestigious agency, and by extension her entire social circle, that I was culturally deficient and in need of supervision to raise my own child appropriately. I was trying to help, Vivian insisted, her tone shifting to one of wounded innocence. To smooth the way for Elena, who hasn't had the benefit of proper examples for raising a child in our social position. Stop, Michael said firmly. Just stop. You've gone too far, Mom. Way too far. A knock at the door interrupted the confrontation. Robert entered without waiting for a response, his expression tense. The guests are wondering where everyone's disappeared to. The photographer is waiting, and several people are preparing to leave. We'll be right there, Vivian replied automatically, her social mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Robert glanced between the three of us, clearly sensing the tension, but choosing not to engage with it. 5 minutes, he said before retreating. We need to finish this conversation, Michael said once his father had gone. But right now, there are 100 people waiting. Of course, Vivian agreed smoothly. Family disputes should never be conducted in public view. This isn't a dispute, I corrected her. This is a boundary being crossed, repeatedly and deliberately. We'll discuss it later, Michael insisted, offering his hand to me. Let's just get through the rest of this party. I looked at his outstretched hand, then at Vivian's composed expression that revealed no remorse, only tactical retreat. The thought of returning to that garden, of smiling for photographs and making small talk with people who had been told I wasn't fit to raise my own child without supervision, made my stomach clench. I can't, I said quietly. I won't go back out there and pretend everything is fine when your mother has been telling people I'm culturally unfit to be a mother. Elena, Michael began, his tone verging on pleading. Just a few more hours. We can sort this out privately later. That's always your answer, I replied, a wave of clarity washing over me. Later, in private. Don't make a scene. But later never comes, Michael. The boundaries get crossed, the damage is done, and we move on until the next transgression. You're being dramatic, Vivian interjected. This is hardly the crisis you're making it out to be. It's not dramatic to expect basic respect, I countered. To have a say in decisions about my own child, to not be undermined and belittled because of my background. No one is belittling you, Vivian insisted. I'm simply acknowledging realities you seem determined to ignore. Mom, stop, Michael warned, but it was too late. The reality is that you don't approve of me, I said to Vivian. You never have. And now you're taking steps to ensure my influence over my own child is minimized. Vivian's expression hardened. What I don't approve of is your stubborn refusal to accept guidance from those with experience in navigating the world your child will inhabit. Your insistence on prioritizing your career over full-time motherhood. Your resistance to traditions that have served the Harrington family for generations. So I'm right, I said quietly. You think I'm unfit. I think, Vivian replied with careful precision, that you are unprepared for the responsibilities of raising a Harrington heir properly. Which is why I've taken steps to ensure my grandson receives appropriate guidance regardless of your personal limitations. The words hung in the air between us, too explicit to be misinterpreted, too deliberate to be walked back. Michael stared at his mother, shock evident in his expression. You can't possibly mean that, he said finally. Of course she does, I replied, a strange calm settling over me as the suspicions of 3 years were finally confirmed. She's always meant it. The only difference is that she's finally saying it out loud. Elena, Michael began, but I was already moving toward the door. I need some air, I said, brushing past him. Don't follow me. I made my way through the house, past curious staff members and the occasional guest who had wandered inside, until I reached the front entrance. Outside, away from the garden where the party continued in full swing, I took deep breaths of spring air, trying to calm the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "Elena?" My mother's voice came from behind me. She stood in the doorway, concern evident in her expression. "What's happening, mija?" "I need to leave," I said simply. "I can't stay here." Sophia approached, taking my hands in hers. "Tell me." In halting sentences, I explained what had transpired: Vivian's arrangements with the nanny service, her assertions about my fitness as a mother, the cultural prejudice barely disguised as concern for the child's well-being. My mother listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When I finished, she nodded once, decisively. "Then we go," she said simply. "Now." "The party," I began, thinking of the social implications of the host disappearing. "Is not more important than your dignity," my mother finished firmly. "Let's get your things." As we turned to re-enter the house, Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "Elena, please, come back inside so we can talk about this reasonably." "There's nothing reasonable about what just happened," I replied. "Your mother made it perfectly clear how she sees me, and what she's done behind our backs." "She overstepped, yes," he acknowledged. "But walking out in the middle of our gender reveal party isn't the answer. This stopped being our party the moment your mother took control," I pointed out. "And it stopped being about celebrating our child when it became a vehicle for Vivian to remind everyone, including me, of my place in the Harrington hierarchy." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times. "You know how she is. She says things in the heat of the moment. She doesn't really mean—" "She meant every word," I interrupted. "And the fact that you're already making excuses for her tells me everything I need to know about where your priorities lie." "That's not fair," he protested. "I'm trying to keep peace between the two most important women in my life." "And in doing so, you're allowing one of them to undermine and disrespect the other," my mother interjected, her tone firm but not unkind. "That's not peace, Michael. That's capitulation." He looked between us, clearly torn. "What do you want me to do? Cut my mother off? Turn my back on my family?" "I want you to stand with your wife," I replied simply. "To be a partner rather than a mediator. To recognize when boundaries have been crossed and hold firm, rather than seeking compromise that only enables further transgressions." From the garden came the sound of laughter and music, the celebration continuing without us. Michael glanced back toward the party, then at me, indecision written across his features. "People are waiting," he said finally. "The photographer, the cake cutting, the final toasts. We can't just disappear." "Yes, we can," I contradicted him. "We can choose our dignity over social obligation. We can refuse to participate in a celebration that has become a vehicle for my humiliation." "You're asking me to create a public scene," he said, lowering his voice, "to embarrass my parents in front of their friends and colleagues." "I'm asking you to stand with me," I corrected. "To show that we are a unit, that decisions about our child are ours to make, that your mother's behavior has consequences." Michael hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the answer I'd been dreading. Once again, maintaining appearances would take precedence over confronting the real issue. "I'll speak with her tomorrow," he promised. Firmly. "But right now, we need to finish what we started. There are 100 people back there expecting us." I nodded slowly, a strange calm settling over me. "Then you should go to them. Elena." "I'm leaving, Michael," I said quietly. "With or without you. What happens next is your choice." The moment stretched between us, filled with the weight of 3 years of similar moments, small surrenders, quiet compromises, lines redrawn ever closer to allow Vivian's influence to expand unchecked. "Please don't do this," he said finally. "I already am," I replied, turning to my mother. "Can you drive me home?" Sophia nodded, her expression sad but resolute. "Of course, mija." As we walked toward my mother's rental car, I heard Michael call my name once more. I didn't turn back. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to draw are the ones we've allowed to be crossed too many times before. Sometimes walking away is the only path forward. What I didn't yet know was that my departure from that perfect blue butterfly celebration would set in motion events that would transform not just my marriage, but the entire power dynamic within the Harrington family forever. The drive home with my mother passed in tense silence. The gentle curves of Brookline's tree-lined streets gave way to the more modest neighborhoods of Cambridge, where Michael and I had purchased our townhouse. Far enough from the Harrington sphere of influence to maintain some independence, close. Enough to satisfy Vivian's expectations of appropriate address. "Do you want to talk about it?" my mother finally asked as we turned onto our street. I shook my head, my hand resting protectively over my belly where my son, now officially revealed. "To the world," continued his oblivious somersaults. "Not yet. I need to process everything first." The house stood quiet and welcoming as we pulled into the driveway. A 2-story brick townhouse with a small front garden where I'd planted native flowers last fall. It represented the compromise Michael and I had reached between his family's expectations and our own preferences. Not the sprawling Beacon Hill mansion Vivian had pushed for, nor the quirky Jamaica Plain bungalow I'd initially fallen in love with, but something that felt like it could become truly ours. Inside, my mother busied herself making tea while I changed out of the cream-colored designer dress into comfortable leggings and an oversized sweater. As I hung the dress in my closet, I wondered if I would ever wear it again, or if it would remain a physical reminder of this day's painful revelations. "Your father used to say that tea solves nothing but makes everything more bearable," my mother said, setting a steaming mug on the coffee table. She sat beside me on the sofa, close enough to offer comfort without crowding. "When you're ready, I'm here." The simple statement, "I'm here," contrasted sharply with the elaborate machinations of the day. No conditions, no expectations, just presence and support. My eyes filled with tears I'd been holding back since leaving the Harrington estate. "She thinks I'm unfit to be a mother," I said finally, the words catching in my throat. After 3 years of trying to meet her impossible standards, of bending over backward to fit into their world, she still sees me as fundamentally deficient. My mother's expression hardened, but her voice remained gentle. "Vivian Harrington wouldn't recognize a good mother if one raised her own son." She took my hand. "You will be an exceptional mother, Elena, not because of wealth or social connections, but because you have compassion, intelligence, and the courage to stand up for what matters." But what if she's right? The question that had been lurking beneath my anger finally surfaced. What if I don't know how to navigate the world my son will inherit through the Harrington name? "That's not the same as being unfit," my mother pointed out. "No parent knows everything their child will need. We learn and grow alongside them. That's the journey of parenthood." She shifted to face me more directly. "Listen to me, Elena. I came to this country alone at 22, barely speaking English, with nothing but determination and a work visa. I had no idea how to navigate American society, how to help you fit into a world I was still learning myself. But I knew how to love you, how to teach you resilience and dignity, how to show you that your worth comes from who you are, not what others think of you." Her words resonated deeply, reminding me of lessons I'd internalized long ago, but had somehow allowed to be overshadowed by the Harrington emphasis on appearance and status. "What Vivian calls deficiencies," my mother continued, "are actually your strengths. Your different perspective, your understanding of struggle and perseverance, your appreciation for what truly matters. These are gifts you'll give your son that no amount of Harrington money or social conditioning can provide." The sound of a car door slamming interrupted our conversation. Through the front window, I could see Michael's BMW in the driveway, his figure moving quickly toward the house. My mother squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to stay or give you privacy?" "Stay," I said without hesitation. "Please." When Michael entered, his expression was a mixture of concern and frustration. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, signs of agitation in a man who typically maintained careful control. "You left," he said simply, standing in the doorway, between the entryway and living room. "In the middle of our gender reveal party, you just left." "Yes," I acknowledged, "after your mother made it abundantly clear that she considers me culturally and socially unfit to raise our child without professional intervention." He sighed heavily, moving further into the room but not sitting. She was out of line, I know, but disappearing without a word, leaving me to explain to 100 guests why the expectant mother was suddenly gone. Do you have any idea how that looked? The familiar emphasis on appearances rather than substance ignited a fresh wave of anger. "That's what concerns you? How it looked? Not what your mother said or did, but the social embarrassment of my absence?" "Of course I care about what she said," he countered. "I confronted her after you left. But there were better ways to handle this than creating a public spectacle." "I didn't create the spectacle," I pointed out. "Your mother did when she invited the Westbrooks to our party with a prearranged contract, when she told them and her friends that I needed cultural correction to raise my own child properly." Michael ran a hand through his hair. "She overstepped, absolutely, but walking out wasn't the solution." "What would you have had me do?" I asked. "Stay and smile for photographs? Cut the cake and make toasts as if I hadn't just been told I'm fundamentally inadequate as a mother?" "You could have waited until later to address it privately," he suggested, "instead of embarrassing everyone involved." "Everyone except me, you mean?" I replied. "My embarrassment, my humiliation doesn't factor into your calculation?" Michael's expression softened slightly. "Of course it does. I hate that you were hurt. But there are ways to establish boundaries without burning bridges." My mother, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "Sometimes bridges need to burn, Michael, especially when they only lead back to places that diminish you." He looked at her with surprise, as if he'd forgotten she was present. "With all due respect, Sophia, this is between Elena and me, and my family." "Elena is my family," she replied calmly. "And that child she's carrying is my grandchild. When someone suggests my daughter is unfit to be a mother because of her heritage, my heritage, it becomes very much my concern." Michael had the grace to look somewhat abashed. "That's not exactly what my mother meant." "It's precisely what she meant," I interrupted. "She arranged for a nanny service specifically designed to provide cultural guidance to ensure our son is raised with proper values, despite my influence. She told them about my background as something that needs to be corrected or overcome." "She's from a different generation," Michael said, a note of pleading entering his voice. "She expresses things poorly sometimes, but her heart is in the right place. She wants the best for our child." "No," I contradicted him. "She wants what she thinks is best, what maintains the Harrington image and legacy. That's not the same thing." My mother stood. "I think you two need to talk privately. I'll be in tea. The guest room if you need me, Elena." After she left, Michael finally sat in the armchair across from me, loosening his tie further. "This isn't how I imagined today would end," he said quietly. "Me neither," I agreed. "I thought we were celebrating our baby, not defending my fitness as a mother." A heavy silence fell between us. The weight of unspoken tensions accumulated over 3 years of marriage to a Harrington. "What do you want to do?" Michael finally asked. About the Westbrook situation, I mean. There is no situation, I replied firmly. We're not engaging their services. Period. He nodded slowly. Agreed. I'll call them Monday and make that clear. And your mother? I pressed. What about her ongoing interference in our lives? Her assumption that she can make unilateral decisions about our child's upbringing? Michael sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I'll speak with her. Set clearer boundaries. But you have to understand, Elena. She's not going to change overnight. She's been the matriarch of the Harrington family for 30 years. Control is second nature to her. That's not good enough anymore, I said, a new resolve hardening within me. I've spent 3 years trying to adapt to Harrington expectations, making allowances for your mother's generational differences, accepting her thinly veiled criticisms and condescension. But this crosses a line I can't ignore. What are you saying? Michael asked, wariness entering his expression. I'm saying I won't allow our child to grow up in an environment where half his heritage is treated as a deficiency to be corrected, where his mother's values and culture are systematically undermined by his grandmother, where appearances matter more than authenticity. No one is asking you to. Your mother is, I interrupted. She's made it explicitly clear that she doesn't believe I'm capable of raising a proper Harrington heir without professional intervention to mitigate my cultural influence. Michael was silent for a long moment. What do you need from me? He finally asked. It was the first time in our entire relationship that he'd posed the question so directly, without qualifications or attempts to negotiate a middle ground. I need you to choose, I said simply. Not between your mother and me as individuals, but between two visions of family. One where external appearances and social status dictate our choices, or one where we define our own values and raise our child accordingly. That's a false dichotomy, he protested. We can respect certain Harrington traditions while still establishing our own family culture. Not if those traditions include the systematic devaluation of my heritage, I countered. Not if respect means allowing your mother to override our parental decisions whenever she disapproves. So you're asking me to cut ties with my family? To deny our child his Harrington connections and opportunities? I'm asking you to establish boundaries that protect our family, you, me, and our son, from toxic influences, regardless of where they come from. If your parents can respect those boundaries, wonderful. If not, then the distance isn't our choice, but theirs. Michael stood abruptly, pacing the length of our living room. You make it sound so simple, as if I can just flip a switch and transform relationships that have shaped my entire life. There's nothing simple about it, I acknowledged, but becoming parents changes everything. We're no longer just managing our own relationships with your family, we're establishing the foundation for how they'll interact with our child. He stopped pacing, turning to face me. I need time to think. This has all happened so fast. The party, my mother's arrangements with Westbrook, your leaving. I can't make life-altering decisions in the heat of emotion. Part of me wanted to push, to demand immediate commitment to the boundaries I knew we needed. But I recognized the genuine struggle in Michael's expression. He stood at a crossroads between the weight of Harrington expectations that had shaped his entire life and the possibility of a different path forward. Take the time you need, I said finally. But understand that I won't compromise on this. Our child deserves better than what I experienced today. The following morning brought the first tangible consequence of my departure from the gender reveal party. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Abigail Taylor, Vivian's closest friend. Elena, I hope you're feeling better today. These pregnancy hormones can be so difficult to manage, especially for first-time mothers. Vivian explained your emotional episode yesterday, and we all understand completely. The Westbrooks have graciously agreed to maintain your placement on their client roster despite the awkwardness. Do let me know if you need any recommendations for managing these mood fluctuations before the baby arrives. The message revealed Vivian's damage control strategy with crystal clarity, blame my emotional episode on pregnancy hormones rather than acknowledge her own inappropriate behavior. The narrative was being carefully constructed to preserve her social standing while undermining my credibility. Before I could decide whether to respond, another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. Mrs. Harrington, this is Margaret Westbrook. I wanted to reach out personally regarding yesterday's misunderstanding. While we understand that pregnancy can cause emotional volatility, we do need to confirm your family's commitment to our services before releasing your reserved placement to another client. Please advise at your earliest convenience. The presumption took my breath away. Not only was the narrative of my emotional volatility already circulating, but the Westbrooks still considered our engagement of their services a foregone conclusion despite my explicit rejection. I showed both messages to my mother over breakfast, watching her expression darken as she read them. So this is how they operate, she observed, rewriting reality to maintain their social fiction. It's how they've always operated, I confirmed. Appearances above all else. What will you do? She asked. I considered my options carefully. I could ignore them, which is probably what they expect. The emotional pregnant woman retreating in embarrassment. I could respond defensively, which would only reinforce their narrative. Or, my mother prompted. Or I could address the situation directly, on my own terms, without apology or emotional reactivity. She smiled, pride evident in her expression. There's my daughter. I drafted a response to Margaret Westbrook first. Ms. Westbrook, to clarify any misunderstanding, Michael and I have not authorized any childcare arrangements through your agency. Any application submitted by Vivian Harrington was done without our knowledge or consent. We will not be requiring your services. Please direct any future communications regarding our family to my husband or me directly, not through my mother-in-law. Regards, Elena Navarro Harrington. To Abigail, I was equally direct. Abigail, I appreciate your concern, but there was no emotional episode yesterday. I made a deliberate choice to remove myself from a situation where my cultural background was being characterized as a deficiency, requiring professional correction. I hope you can understand that as a mother, I must model self-respect for my child, which sometimes means refusing to participate in environments that undermine my dignity. Elena. Michael returned home late that afternoon, having spent the day at his office despite it being Sunday. His expression was somber as he set his laptop bag down in the entryway. I've been thinking about everything, he said without preamble. About what happened yesterday, about what you said. I waited, giving him space to continue. I spoke with my father this morning, he continued. He came to the office to damage control the fallout from yesterday. You know what his primary concern was? Not how you were feeling, not whether our marriage was okay, but how to manage the optics of your departure for my business relationships. The admission didn't surprise me, but Michael's tone, a mixture of disappointment and dawning clarity, suggested it had impacted him differently than similar incidents in the past. What did you tell him? I asked. That I didn't give a damn about the optics, Michael replied, a note of defiance I'd rarely heard from him entering his voice. That my pregnant wife had been treated disrespectfully, and that was the only issue that mattered. He moved to sit beside me on the sofa. He didn't get it, Elena. He talked about family loyalty and public appearances as if they were the same thing. As if standing by my mother's inappropriate behavior was the same as standing by my family. That's how it's always been, I observed gently. Performance over authenticity, image over connection. I know, he acknowledged, and I've been complicit in it my entire life. Finding ways to maintain peace by avoiding direct confrontation, letting small transgressions slide to prevent larger conflicts. He took my hand, his expression more open and vulnerable than I'd seen in months. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you yesterday, that I was more concerned about the social fallout than about how you were feeling. That's not the kind of husband I want to be, or the kind of father our son deserves." The apology, so direct and unqualified, caught me by surprise. "What changed?" I asked. "Perspective," he replied simply. "Seeing my father's reaction this morning, so devoid of genuine concern for you or our marriage, I suddenly saw myself through your eyes. Always trying to find the middle ground, never taking a firm stand. It's not strength, it's avoidance dressed up as diplomacy." He hesitated, then continued. "I called my mother after speaking with Dad. Told her that her behavior yesterday was completely unacceptable, that arranging childcare services behind our backs crossed a fundamental boundary, and that her characterization of your background as a deficiency was not only wrong, but deeply hurtful." "How did she respond?" I asked, both hopeful and wary. "Defensively at first," Michael admitted. "She tried the pregnancy hormones explanation, suggested you had misinterpreted her intentions. When that didn't work, she shifted to justification, that she was only trying to help, that her connections with Westbrook were a gift we were ungratefully rejecting." He shook his head slightly, as if still processing the conversation. "When I held firm, she got quiet in that way she does when she's recalibrating her approach. Then she apologized. Not for what she did, but for how it made you feel. A non-apology apology. And," I prompted. "And I told her it wasn't enough," Michael said, a new resolve evident in his tone. "That going forward, there would be new boundaries regarding our child and our parenting decisions. That her involvement in our family life would depend entirely on her ability to respect those boundaries and treat you as an equal, not someone in need of correction or guidance." I squeezed his hand, emotion welling up. "Thank you. That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," he acknowledged. "But it was necessary. For us, for our son, for the family we're creating together." He placed his free hand gently on my belly. "I want our child to grow up knowing both sides of his heritage are valuable, to be proud of his Navarro roots as well as his Harrington connections, to understand that true worth comes from character and values, not social status or family name." The words were like balm to wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged, affirming that the vision of family I held was one Michael shared, even if he was still learning how to defend it against external pressures. "We have a lot of work to do," I said, not wanting to pretend that a single conversation would transform entrenched family dynamics. "Your mother won't change overnight, if at all." "I know," he agreed, "but we'll face it together from now on. No more triangulation, no more separate conversations where she can play us against each other. United front on all decisions regarding our child." My mother emerged from the kitchen where she'd been giving us privacy, a warm smile lighting her features. "Dinner's almost ready. Nothing fancy, just my grandmother's chile rellenos recipe." Michael stood, embracing her with genuine affection. "Sophia, thank you for being here for Elena. For both of us, really." "Family supports each other," she replied simply. "Not by controlling or directing, but by respecting and uplifting." Over dinner, we discussed practical steps for establishing and maintaining the boundaries our family needed. Michael suggested we draft a clear email to both his parents outlining our expectations going forward. I proposed regular check-ins between the two of us to ensure we remained aligned in our approach. "What about the nursery?" my mother asked. "You mentioned the painting was only half finished." Michael looked sheepish. "Work has been crazy, and I kept pushing it off. But I'll finish it next weekend, I promise." "Or," my mother suggested with a smile, "we could make it a family project, the three of us, creating a space for the newest member of our family." The suggestion, so simple, yet so meaningful, captured exactly what I wanted for our child. Not the perfectly coordinated nursery Vivian would have commissioned from an expensive designer, but a room created with love by the people who would form the foundation of his life. "I'd like that," I said softly. "Very much." The following morning brought another text, this one from Vivian herself. "Elena, I hope you're feeling better today. Michael tells me I've overstepped regarding the childcare arrangements, and for that, I apologize. Perhaps once things have settled, we can discuss your vision for the baby's upbringing. I still have many connections that could benefit my grandson's development. Lunch on Thursday? Just the two of us." I showed the message to Michael, who read it with a wry smile. Classic mom. The apology followed immediately by another attempt to insert herself into our decisions. "At least she's acknowledging she overstepped," I pointed out. "That's progress, however small." "How do you want to respond?" he asked, demonstrating the new partnership approach we'd committed to. I considered carefully. "I think space is still needed. The wound is too fresh for a one-on-one lunch where she can work on wearing down my resistance." "I agree," Michael said. "Want me to respond, or would you prefer to?" "I will," I decided, drafting a message that was firm but not antagonistic. "Vivian, thank you for the invitation, but I'm not ready for that conversation yet. What happened at the gender reveal went beyond overstepping. It revealed fundamental differences in how we view my role as a mother and the value of my cultural heritage. Michael and I are united in our vision for raising our son with respect for both sides of his family background. When you're ready to engage with that vision, rather than attempting to modify it, we can revisit. For now, some distance seems healthiest. For everyone." After sending the message, I felt a weight lift, the burden of trying to contort myself into a shape that would fit Vivian's narrow definition of a proper Harrington wife and mother. For perhaps the first time since marrying into the family, I was standing firmly in my truth without apology or compromise. The days that followed brought their own challenges. Robert called Michael repeatedly, attempting to broker a peace that required no real change from Vivian, just surface-level reconciliation. Several of Vivian's friends sent messages expressing concern about my absence from a charity luncheon I'd never actually agreed to attend. But alongside these expected pressures came unexpected moments of growth. Michael and I spent an evening designing a nursery that blended elements from both our cultural backgrounds, the traditional Harrington blue his mother would have insisted upon, but with vibrant accents inspired by Mexican folk art. He ordered books in both English and Spanish, determined that our son would grow up bilingual, connected to all facets of his heritage. My mother extended her stay by 2 weeks, her presence a reminder of what healthy family support looked like, offering guidance when asked, respecting boundaries when established, celebrating differences rather than attempting to erase them. 1 week after the gender reveal debacle, as the three of us painted the nursery together, Michael's phone rang with his mother's ringtone. He glanced at me, silently asking whether he should answer. In that moment, I understood that the boundaries I'd drawn by walking away from the gender reveal party hadn't just protected my dignity. They had created the possibility of a more authentic relationship for everyone involved. By refusing to accept disrespect disguised as tradition, I had opened a door to a new kind of family connection based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. Mateo would grow up with both histories honored, both languages spoken, both cultures celebrated. Not because I had fought an endless battle against Harrington influence, but because I had stood firmly in my worth until it could no longer be denied or diminished. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth, but the foundation had been established for a family identity built on integration rather than erasure, on expansion rather than contraction. Sometimes the most powerful step isn't fighting harder within a broken system, but walking away to create something healthier. Sometimes standing in your dignity creates the space for others to rediscover theirs. And sometimes the boundaries we draw become not walls that separate, but thresholds that invite a more authentic way of being together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.